you looking to up your real estate investing game? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sub 2 Deals Show with your host, Sub 2 expert William Tingle.
Hey Sub 2ers, this is William Tingle of Sub2Deals.com. I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the Sub 2 Deals Show, where we discuss all things subject to. We cover how to get the deed, turn leads into deeds, and just about anything else you can think of related to subject to. Today's topic is, what if they don't pay? That's a question I get a lot, so I thought it would be a good show for today. When I first got started investing, I had the usual concerns most investors do. Where would I get the money for deals? I had good credit, but didn't have a lot of cash. I made a pretty good income, about $60,000 a year back in 1999, but we lived like most families. We spent everything we made. We charged Christmas up at Christmas time and spent the first 6 months of the next year paying it off. Like I said, I had good credit but didn't have a lot of cash, so where to get the money was a concern. How would I find deals? How would I find people willing to sell at a discount or sign over a deed to me? How do you complete all the paperwork? My goodness, I remember ordering the Carlton Sheets course and sitting down on my couch with it the day the UPS guy dropped it off, and I opened that thing up and started reading, and after a couple of hours, my eyes were just glazed over, and I said, I'm never going to get all of this. It's just too complicated. But, after a while, you start to pick things up, so it wasn't really that big a deal. How do you find people to do repairs for a decent price who won't rip you off? Man, that's always a concern, isn't it? It seems like you find a contractor and he does a few jobs for you and does a really good job at a good price, and then he just disappears. That's just the nature of the beast with contractors. But of course that was a concern. And then of course the what if they don't pay concern. What if you go out and you buy these houses and you fill them with people and then they just don't pay you? Now understand, at one time I offered properties just about every way under the sun. Now if you followed me for any period of time over the past few years, you know that all I do is seller financing. But when I first got started, things were a little bit different. When I lived in the U.S. and invested in one spot, I did it all. I retailed houses, I rented houses out, I rented some Section 8, lease optioned some, and of course sold some with seller financing. And I did this because I didn't want to ever have vacant properties. Vacant properties cost you every single day that they sit unoccupied. And one of my earliest teachers taught me that whenever he got a new property, the first thing he did was put a big sign in the yard, and all that sign said was available, along with his phone number. If someone called him up looking to rent, bam, it just happened to be a rental. If they were looking for a house to buy with owner financing, boom, instant owner finance deal. If they wanted a lease option, well, you can kind of guess. It was a lease option house. He said this would ensure you would have absolutely no days of vacancy and your houses would stay filled. And listen, I was a new investor. It made a lot of sense to me. I just didn't know any better. What he failed to mention was that this fly-by-the-seats kind of way of filling your houses with no real plan wasn't really the best long-term business strategy. Yes, I agree it's important to minimize vacancy. But it's also important to have a clear, well thought out plan when it comes to your business. Having several different ways to, deal with tenants and optioners and buyers, it can get confusing. If you know me, I like to keep things really simple. And now you know one of the reasons why. My early landlording, financing, and optioning days could get kind of messy, especially when they don't pay. Now you got to know, I was a real hard ass in the beginning. If somebody didn't pay me, I'd drive over there and I'd beat on my chest and tell them, hey, you can't stay in my house without paying. You got to pay or get out. When the attorney you use to handle your evictions actually takes you to lunch and tells you need to chill the hell out, you know you're kind of extreme. Yeah, that did happen to me. You know one thing, new investors, that's right, and you guys, I'm talking to you. If you buy houses and rent them out, or option them, or finance them, the day will come when the person occupying one of those houses will not pay. So what do you do when they don't pay? Now, Let me start this by saying that I am not going to give you a technical guide on what to do for evictions or foreclosures. That varies by state, and you should know the state laws regarding what they are and how they affect what you do. I have always made a point of knowing the law and how it applies to me and what to do in the areas that I operate. I recommend Thomson West as a source for law books. For years, I have bought from them. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on law books, and as soon as you can afford it, you should too for the areas you're going to be operating in. Tenant landlord law, notes and mortgages, knowing as much as possible about those things is really going to help you out if you do find yourself in front of a judge or just in drafting your contracts and what you can and can't do. Now, my purpose here today is to give you advice on how to handle non-payment and give you some tips on some things you can do to lessen the frequency of non-payment and have fewer problems if it does happen. But oh, it will happen. You can count on it. Now, the first step's the same no matter how the people occupy your property, whether they're a renter, an optioner, or a buyer. It really doesn't matter. You need to know what the problem causing non-payment is. Now, sometimes the check gets lost in the mail. Yes, it does happen that way. Sometimes they just haven't paid, and this is the excuse they'll give you. This happens too. Well, how do you prevent that? Well, number one, we don't take checks. They can't pay in person or with cash. Our buyers must have a bank account, and this is actually a condition of them being able to buy one of our homes. Their payment to us is ACH drafted each month on the 25th. Within 3 days, it's in our bank account. So by the 28th, we've been paid and we have the funds to make our mortgage payments on the 1st. Lost check problem solved. We use a service called Clear Now, and I'm going to drop a link in the show notes that'll give you 2 free months if you decide to use them. Now, Clear Now is a really great service that will actually report your tenant or buyer's on-time payments to the credit bureau to help with credit repair. Now, back to knowing what the problem is. If your tenant hasn't paid by the due date, pick up the phone and give them a call. If they won't answer the phone, get in your car and drive over there. Don't be afraid to ask for your money. This actually reminds me of a house that we bought subject to way back in Macon, Georgia. This was a little rental property. The guy called me up. He said he had bought it, I believe for $25,000 several years before. It was on a 10-year note. The guy only had 3 years left. His payment was around $250 a month, and I believe the girl's rent payment was only about $300, so there wasn't much cash flow. And this guy only owned one rental property and had a management company handling it. He said the girl hadn't paid in 3 months, and of course he hadn't made his mortgage payment in 3 months. He didn't have the money. So we met at a McDonald's. He signed up all the paperwork, gave me the house that at the time had like a $7,000 balance. It was just ridiculously low. And I left that McDonald's, drove a half mile to the house, knocked on the door. The tenant answered the door, and I said, "Hey," I said, "my name's William Tingle. I'm property manager for the new company that owns this house, and we understand that you haven't made the payment in 3 months. Now, I'm here to collect payment." And she said, "Let me get my purse." And the lady paid me. All I did was knock on the door and ask for the money. The owner of that property could have done the same thing, but he hired a management company, felt like he needed to be hands off, and frankly, just didn't have the courage to go ask the girl for the money. It's really ridiculous. I mean, you buy a property and then you can't handle it. And don't ever be that person. At any rate, my conversation with a buyer who hasn't paid typically is going to start off something like this. I'm going to call them up, and when they answer, I'm going to say, "Hey, Joe, this is William over at Sell a Home Inc." Remember, I'm always a management person, never an owner or a big wheel in any way. Anyway, to continue, I'll say, "Our bookkeeper sent me the late list today, and I noticed that we haven't received your payment for June yet. That's unusual. I never see your name on that list, so I'm just calling to see what happened." Then I'm going to listen for their response. Now, they may tell me that their wife left them and they can't make the payment without her income. They may tell me that they got hurt at work 2 weeks ago and they haven't been able to work and don't have the money to pay, but they'll be back at work next week. The most important thing to find out is what the problem is and determine whether or not it's likely to be temporary or it's going to be an ongoing thing. If it's temporary, you usually work it out. If it's something that's not going to be temporary, you need to start now on working something out to retake possession of that property. And the sooner you know this, the better off you'll be. This is one reason I do not use, have never used, and do not recommend management companies. They're slow to act on late pays, and no one, and I mean no one, will ever really care about your business the way you do. Now, we get all of our payments via ACH, so if the payment falls through or doesn't go through, I'm on the phone the next day. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to say to your non-paying buyers and how to drastically increase your chances of not ending up in court.
The Sub2 Deals Show with your host, Sub2 expert William Tingle. We'll be right back. Have you ever had a seller give you a house? It's a pretty awesome experience. If a seller wanted to give you a house today, would you know what needed to be done to make the deal happen? Would you like to learn how? The Ultimate Sub2 Guidebook will show you exactly what you need to get those deeds and sell those houses with seller financing. Join the thousands of other investors across the country who learned how to get the deed with the Ultimate Sub2 Guidebook. Get the Ultimate Sub2 Guidebook today at sub2deals.com. Back to the show, the Sub2 Deals Show, with your host, Sub2 expert William Tingle.
Welcome back, Sub2ers. We're talking about how to handle non-payers. Let's say your tenant or buyer's late situation is temporary. My first question to them is, well, Joe, we really need to get something in here. How much can you pay today? If the payment they can make is at least half of what they owe, I'll take it and divide the balance owed into 3 monthly payments over the next 3 months, separate from the regular payment, and we move forward. This works for me for someone who's never been late before. If it's a habitual thing, we're not going to do this month after month. But if Joe's been in the house for 2 years and this is the first problem he's had, then this is a simple thing to do. We're getting most of our payment in right now. We'll divide the rest into 3 equal monthly payments, and then we'll just keep going forward. I collect what they have now, send them agreement for the next 3 payments, and then we move forward like nothing's happened. If their situation looks to be permanent and is something that will not allow them to stay, I ask, okay, Joe, so what I hear you saying is you're not going to be able to make the payments going forward, so what's your plan? Now, what I'm really doing here is just testing to see if they've already made plans, or really just kind of what they have on their mind. If they tell me that they're going to be moving at the first of the month, I send them an agreement to that fact, that they'll be moving out. They sign it, send it back to me. We go ahead and set up a time for someone else to go out, take a look at the place so we know what we're dealing with to get the house ready for our next buyer. We move forward with taking possession of that property. We know we don't file anything with the courthouse. We take these guys at their word, but we go ahead and we send people out to take care of things that need to be done. If they're less than forthcoming with a plan, or say something like, well, I don't know, we have a lot of money in the house and can't see walking away. Can't you work with us on it? I know when I hear this that I could be moving toward an ugly situation depending on how it's handled. It's important to be kind but firm in dealing with them going forward. Now, in almost 10 years of dealing exclusively with seller finance deals, I've only had 4 of my buyers truly default and abandon the property, and not one single time have we had to go before a judge because of the unique way that I deal with it. Now, first I get the information. When I designed my current business, one of the things I incorporated was a cash for keys plan to deal with defaults to minimize the chances I would have a long, drawn-out repossession on any of the houses. Sure, I'm positive that one day somebody's going to drag it out to the last minute and fight it, but so far they haven't. Now, I have a formula that I use that I believe is both generous and fair and still allows me to make a good deal on the property. Now, this is what I do. I take my buyer's down payment divide it by 2, subtract needed repairs and back payments, and the rest can be used to give them cash for keys. So for example, let's say Joe gave me $15,000 down on his house. Now Joe's been there for 2 years. He's paid me every month. My cash flow has been between $400 and $500 a month. So I've made probably $12,000 in cash flow for the 2 years he's been there. But now he and his wife are divorcing. Neither can afford the house on one income, so they're going to have to move. Now Joe didn't make his payment this month. We talked as soon as it was late, and he explained the situation. I offered he and his wife some money to get a new start in an apartment, and they agreed. I sent one of my people over to do a quick assessment. They discovered that the house was really in good condition. All it needed was a good cleaning, maybe the carpets cleaned, so maybe $500 tops. So the missed payment is $1,200. I take their down payment of $15,000, divide it by 2 to get $7,500, subtract $1,700, and I get $5,800 as the maximum I can give them. Now in this scenario, I'm not going to start by offering them $5,800. I might start with $3,000 as a payment to them when they gave me the keys in a clean, vacated house. And if I needed, I would gradually move up to the $5,800 during negotiation. But remember, during the negotiation, I also remind them that if we do things this way, they don't have to worry about an eviction or foreclosure on their credit, because if they've been in our program, we've been working on credit repair. And we'll also give them a good reference to their new apartments or for their landlord that they'll be moving into a new house with. In addition, they'll also be welcome to buy from us again once they're back on their feet and can afford a home. In every case so far, this has gotten my defaulted buyer out while letting me avoid a possible court case and vacancy, which would have probably cost much more than the money that I pay them. Giving up a little bit of cash actually lets me make more profit on the house by getting it ready faster and selling it for another down payment and a slightly higher price. Even in a bad situation, it lets everyone have some degree of winning. No defaulting buyer ever expects to be offered a check, so it's a pleasant surprise for them. They have also been working on their credit, so not having to worry about a foreclosure or eviction is an added bonus. A good reference to the apartment or house they're moving to, and the ability to buy from us again once they're back on their feet, well, that's just the icing on the cake. Now, this is how I deal with my buyers. Your mileage may vary. You may not want to do anything like this, and that's okay. I didn't do it for years. But dealing with tenants, that may be somewhat different altogether. The important thing to remember is whether tenant or buyer, you need to act quickly as soon as payment has not been made as agreed. Remember, ask questions. You have a right to know what's going on, and you need to know to make sound decisions on what needs to happen next. If your cost on a house are $1,000 per month, every day that house sits vacant or you have a non-paying person in that house, it costs you $33. Every week, it costs you $233. And that's just wasted money. Remember that a non-paying tenant or buyer does not mean you will have to go before a judge. In fact, you should try your best not to have to go to court, because when you go to court, the only winners are the lawyers. Talk to your tenant or buyer. Gather the facts. Offer solutions. Remain calm. Be fair but firm. If you set the expectations in the beginning when they first move into your house, your chances of having problems will be much less. But things still happen to good-intentioned people. Do business honestly and with integrity, and treat people fairly, and you'll be way ahead in a default situation. I hope this has helped you and give you some things to think about when your tenants or your buyers don't pay. If you have questions on this or anything else real estate related, you can always contact me at sub2deals.com or directly at william@sub2deals.com. Or you can find us on Facebook at our group, Subject to Real Estate Forum. Thanks for listening. Now get out there and buy some houses.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Sub2 Deals Show with William Tingle. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And for more great content and to stay up to date, visit sub2deals.com or on Facebook at Sub2 Deals. We'll catch you next time.